three parts to the mimer. First part, explaining Poda, besholom, which is the revelation of Yechidah Shebenefesh. Second part, explaining the questions, two questions we had. One is, what's the difference between the two different levels of sholom? Where we said there's Poda besholom, besholom. We also said Shavti besholom, besholom, two different levels of sholom. And we also said Kol Benayich, Rav Shlom. Rav means at least two. So there's two different levels of shalom. And we said, from above below and from below above. And I'm not going to translate that anymore. I've given up translating that. We should know what that means by now. Okay. So we want to know what the difference is between these two, because if they're the same, so what difference does it make if it comes from below, above? There's only one type of shalom. The question is, what's the source of it? That's a separate issue, but there's only one level of shalom. No, there's two different levels of shalom, and what's the difference between them? That's one question. Another question is, how can it be that the Aveda milamata lamayla is called shalom? We said that's a milchama. Right? You're encountering the Nefesh Bahamis directly. The word is, of course, hislavshus, the hislavshus of the Nefesh Elokis into the Nefesh Bahamis. That's a direct confrontation, and therefore it's a milchama. Now, you might win the milchama. There's no problem winning the milchama. Halavai, we should win the milchama, but there's still a milchama. And even after the milchama, it's theoretically possible that after there's been a temporary vanquishing of the enemy can rear its head again. Okay, so those are our two basic questions in Dalet. In Hey, we started discussing the difference between the two different levels of affecting the below. There's a revelation from above which brings about a bittul of the below. Right? The below is nullified. There's an avodah from below that brings about, the Rabbi hasn't used this word yet, but that's what he's talking about, zikuch, a purification, rectification, elevation of the below. And both of those have their advantages, as we'll see as we go through the rest of Hey, Vav, and Zion. Okay? I'm just, before I forget, I'm sorry. Wednesday, Thursday, Bezrat Hashem, Rabbi Kleinman will be teaching Shir. Okay, and it'll be this class and Rabbi Levinger's class together, since we're both going. It's sort of silly to have two classes. So he'll be teaching here, in this room, those two classes together, Wednesday, Thursday. Sunday, Rabbi Levinger's back. I'm not. So you guys can do a review on Sunday. I trust you on Sunday. Or you can sleep in after a wild Shabbos where you'd framed all night and learned Chassidus all day, didn't finish davening until 5 minutes before Shkia, and so you need to rest. Daven Shachris. You know, Rivka fell off her donkey, right, when she saw Yitzchak, right? Last week's Parsha. Rivka come 2 weeks ago, Chai Sarah. Rivka comes to see Yitzchak. Rivka comes to see Yitzchak. And she asks Eliezer, who's that? And he says, that's my master. And she falls off the donkey. Why'd she fall off the donkey? What was her issue? So what was Yitzchak doing when she saw it? Rashi on Chumash, gentlemen. If you don't know this, you didn't learn Rashi on Chumash. If you don't know Rashi on Chumash, then you're less educated than your average 5-year-old Jewish child. So don't do that to yourself. Learn Rashi on Chumash every week. Right? It's what you're doing to yourself. It's not something that's someone else is doing. If you're not doing Rashi seriously, at least try to remember. I understand you first time you see, you don't remember every Rashi, but So she saw him davening. What was he davening? Mincha. Yitzchak is the one who established Mincha. No one davened Mincha until Yitzchak. So it was 4 PM, and she got to Eretz Yisrael, and she sees her prospective husband davening at 4 PM. So now she came from a Misnagdisha family. So she was completely freaked out because she thought he was davening Shachris, right? Because they hadn't heard of Mincha, because Yitzchak is the one who established Mincha. So no one had heard of Mincha, so she thought that this guy was still davening Shachris. So what kind of shit did they give me? He's davening Shachris at 4 PM. So she fell off her donkey. And then she found out it was Mincha and she felt better. Now, she doesn't know that he finished Shachris at 3:15 and started Mincha right away. But say they're okay, but that's a separate issue. She didn't have to know that right away. It's things she finds out later. You don't have to know everything at the beginning. Okay. So back to our issue. So we said there's two different levels of shalom. There's shalom from above. There's two different levels of, I wouldn't exactly call it avodah, meaning there's revelation from above and avodah from below. Avodah from below brings about zikuch, and there's an advantage to that. We'll see what it is. The revelation from above brings about bittul. There's an advantage to that. We'll see what it is. Okay. The last thing we saw was footnote 26. Right? We said, and the language that was imported from the Rebbe Rashab was the language of haskama. That the Rebbe Rashab, and there's also a famous mimer of our Rebbe from Tafshin Yud Aleph called Machar Chodesh. Machar Chodesh Tafshin Yud Aleph from our Rebbe, which explains all of this at great length based on that mimer from Mayan base. So if you ever happen to into that mimer, so there you go. Some people said, okay, I'm going to learn the Rebbe's Torah. I'm going to start in the beginning. Tafshin Yud Aleph. So you'll get to it pretty quickly if you're going to start in the beginning. If you just, see a little here, a little there, which is also perfectly reasonable, so then love daf, you'll get to it. Who knows? You get other things. What we saw by the Rebbe Rashab was that the Nefesh Bahamis is masking the love of the Nefesh Elokis, that it's reasonable. It's not that the Nefesh Bahamis has been completely changed. Therefore, we're still calling this iskafia, subduing the Nefesh Bahamis, and not ishafcha, transforming the Nefesh Bahamis. It's not being transformed, it's just agreeing. And one of the besholom we talked about was the two different lawyers, right? The kategar and the sanegar. Okay? Seder. Here, that's footnote 29. When we get to it, we'll look at it. Okay? We're opposite footnote 26. Finally, we're in a book where we all have the same lines. So we're at the beginning of the fourth line on page Lamed Vav, the Kaven. Okay, so we just learned that the seichel of the Nefesh Bahamis, ba lahavana, shetzarech lahavas Hashem. The intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis comes to the realization that it should love God. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that the midos of the Nefesh Elokis love God. That's ishafcha. Doesn't mean the leiv loves God. The seichel appreciates the fact that God is worthy of love. And you should know, you should be happy about this, the Alter Rebbe is very makel, so to speak, in his understanding of the mitzvah of Avos Hashem, that how do you fulfill the mitzvah of Avos Hashem? So you're supposed to love the Eibishter. Oh, there's not too many people who are holding at that level. So how many people? No one's fulfilling the mitzvah of Yahavta Hashem Elokecha B'Lavcha. No one does that mitzvah. That can't be. So the Alter Rebbe explains that what does it mean? How do you fulfill the mitzvah of Avos Hashem? Coming to the intellectual conclusion that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is worthy of your love, even if you don't love Him yet. That's what Hashem will, but you haven't yet brought that into Pnimius. Okay, so then you're still mekayim the mitzvah. So that's what the Rabbi is saying here. I just seichel the Nefesh Bahamis, not the mitzvahs, the seichel, not the emotional attributes, not the leiv, but the seichel understands that he should love God. Doesn't love God yet. But at least I appreciate the fact that God's worthy of my love and I should love Him. And so that's still not meich shalit ala lev. It's still meich shalit ala ma'isa. My heart, my brain understands that God's worthy of love. Does my leiv get that yet? No, not necessarily. The cave and shazeh forth. And the Zesh Nefesh Bahamis Eivas is Hashem. And since the Nefesh Bahamis loves the Eivas, including Gam Havana Vasaga, the understanding and the comprehension, Shetzarech Leves Hashem, that this includes even that level of simply understanding intellectually. Whom mitzad seichel the Nefesh Elokis is all coming from the seichel. Shnis lavish seichel the Nefesh Bahamis is being clothed in the seichel of the Nefesh Bahamis. That means, this is all coming from the seichel of the Nefesh Elokis. That is being clothed in the seichel of the Nefesh Bahamis. Right? The seichel of my Nefesh Elokis is teaching what does the seichel of my Nefesh Elokis wants? It wants me to think about the Eibishter. Okay, so it actually gets me to think about the Eibishter. It gets my Nefesh Bahamis to be maskim, to think about the Eibishter. Oh, beautiful. And once I get my Nefesh Bahamis to think about the Eibishter, my Nefesh Bahamis go, wow, I didn't realize how amazing this is. This is really quite something. Oh, beautiful. So that's the Islavshus Nefesh Bahamis. That the seichel of the Nefesh Bahamis, which is conscious you and me, the source of human consciousness is the seichel of the Nefesh Bahamis. Aval, Nefesh Bahamis mitzad atzma. But the Nefesh Bahamis, mitzad atzma hi nimsheches linyonim gashmim, still drawn to physical things. Who can mavur b'kama, as is explained in a number of places, shabiru the Nefesh Bahamis, the rectification of the Nefesh Bahamis, the elevation and illumination of the Nefesh Bahamis, shal yedei his beinunus, that comes through intellectual comprehension, meditation. Hirak b'derek iskafia. This is the iskafia. This is what we're talking about. Right? This is why we had our whole introduction. This is still iskafia. But wait a minute. My Nefesh Bahamis is on board. Still iskafia. Because I basically just convinced my Nefesh Bahamis that it's a good idea, but my Nefesh Bahamis hasn't completely changed. He's masking. So you're right. What can I say? You're right. What does that mean? What if I'm able to prove you wrong? Oh, so then I'm back to where I was. Right? If it's all based on an intellectual argument, so then theoretically, if I can find a reason, some way intellectually to show that this is unreasonable, so then I'm back to where I was, and I'll change back to whatever was happening before I came to this realization, intellectual realization, that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is worthy of my love. Right? Which is always the problem when it's based on intellect. If it's based on intellect, it's on very shaky ground. Mishabiru the Nefesh Bahamis shalidei is beinenu surak b'derech iskafia. Hare gam achshav. So even now, what does that mean now? Shegam Nefesh Bahamis yesh la'avas Hashem. Even now, when I've come to a realization that the Eibishter is worthy of love, nishar behelim. It still remains, albeit hidden, its opposition to the Nefesh Elokis. Right now it's dormant. Why is it dormant? Because the Nefesh Elokis won the argument, so to speak. But it's there. Ella, she's nagdu shala ein abba befeil, but it doesn't come into actuality. In other words, it's not being expressed, this opposition to the Nefesh Elokis, but it's there. It's always there. And in this person, it's always there, and that's why it's called iskafia. So now, but how do I get rid of that completely and totally? I'm mevatel the menagid. I'm mevatel the opposition to the Nefesh Elokis completely and totally in my Nefesh Bahamis. Nefesh Bahamis is not in opposition. Nefesh Bahamis is in a state of sholem with the Nefesh Elokis. Sholem mamish, not ceasefire. Sholem. In order there should be a nullification of the menagid, of this opposition, that comes from above. That's the or gadol that is mevatel the metzias of the below. Right? So the Nefesh Bahamis is no longer, he's no longer interested in anything but elokus, mamish. It's not that temporarily it's come to the conclusion. Now, it might not be it's not that the Nefesh Bahamis is thinking that this is temporary. It just might very well be, because if something were to happen that were to somehow shake the foundation of my haskama to the Nefesh Elokis, and if that foundation is intellectual, so then it's not so hard to shake it, so then the person might revert back to their previous behavior or their previous state of understanding. Right? Because if it's only intellect, so there might be a cogent argument for the other side, who says there isn't. So the true bittul comes from above. When a person connects to a deeper place in themselves, and in that place, they're connected to the Eibishter much more powerfully. Dal yedei shumizgale b'tachte. By virtue of the fact that it's revealed in the tachtein, in the lower realms, gilui or she'ina be'erech elav, a revelation of light that's not commensurate to the tachtein, not commensurate to the kelim, the vessels of the tachtein. This is a so I'm going to have a very hard time. That's not going to come from below, because it's supernatural. So through nature, I can't get to the supernatural. It's going to have to come from above. Then, but what happens to the Nefesh Bahamis when this level of me is revealed? It's still me. It's just a deeper superconscious level of me. So when that level is revealed, when that level of neshama is revealed, then what happens? The Nefesh Bahamis is bottle. Now, the Rabbi is not so talking, in these last two lines, the Rabbi was talking about, in general, when there's a revelation from above, what happens to the below, which is what we were talking about yesterday. If there's a revelation of infinite reality, then mamela, finite reality, is batal mavutal. That's not what you're experiencing. Were all of a sudden we to become privy to a revelation of infinite reality in this room, we would no longer be aware of the finite reality in this room. Does that mean there's no finite reality in this room? No, that doesn't mean that at all. But you and I wouldn't be aware of it. Just like now, there's an infinite aspect to reality right here. It's not that it's anywhere else. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to get in a plane and keep flying up until I go out of the world before I touch infinity. That's not true. Infinite reality is here. It's just not revealed. Because there's a world that reveals finite reality. Because Kalim revealed finite reality, not infinite reality. Oh, okay. So what do I experience? Finite. What am I aware of? Consciously, I'm aware of the existence of infinite reality. I don't have to go anywhere to get it. It's right here. Okay, but that's not what's revealed here. Were that to be revealed here, so that I would now no longer experience finite, I'd experience infinite. Just like now I experience finite and I don't experience infinite. So if there were a revelation of infinite, I'd experience infinite and I wouldn't experience finite. That's not hard to understand. Okay, so that's called bittul. But what if I'm working in the finite? What's the best I can do? I can elevate the finite to a point where, at this point, we're talking about it being maskim. Right? Now, ultimately, we want to say that that's also going to be sholem, so we're going to have to figure out, so how can that also be an inyan in sholem? Because that's an inyan in milchama. First, I have to convince it. I have to do battle with it. I have to debate it. Okay, so why is that sholem? So we don't know yet. We're going to see that if I can reveal a level that's beyond above and below, so then I can bring about a synthesis of above and below. Okay, we'll get there. That's the end of the mimer. But at this point, we're just distinguishing between these two different levels of connection. There's a connection from the avodah from below, and so that means I'm elevating the below, but the below still stays below. Still is what it is. And then there's a revelation from above, and that revelation from above is mevatel the below. If there's a supernatural revelation, that's called a miracle. So then what disappears temporarily? Nature. Nature disappears. When when water is standing as walls, allowing 3 million people to pass through in 12 lanes, so that means nature is not happening here. It's a complete bittul of nature, because nature doesn't do that. And it's not that it takes any action to revert back to nature. All you have to do is stop that supernatural reality, and mamela, it reverts back to its natural reality. So as soon as that miracle energy disappears, so then the water reverts back to its original state. It doesn't do anything. That's its natural state. Okay. Ubaveda Adam. So what's this in Aveda? So we've basically been talking about it in terms of Aveda, but then we went back to just Metzias. And we'll go back to Aveda. Ubaveda Adam hu. By virtue of the fact that a person is sensitive to, he feels in his nefesh habamis, ha'av the nefesh elokish shelamayla mitam v'das, the love of nefesh elokish, which is beyond intellect. We are hearing a siren. That if we feel the nefesh habamis, if the nefesh habamis feels the av of the nefesh elokish that's beyond tam v'das, the av of the nefesh elokish isn't based on intellect. The av of the nefesh elokish for the Eibishter is much more just an expression of its natural reality. The mashal usually brought the love of a child for a parent. A child doesn't love their parent because they come to the intellectual conclusion that their parent is worthy of their love. Child loves their parent because they're their parent. Right? As a matter of fact, it might take, if chas v'sholom, the parent is not really worthy of being a parent, and they're abusive, so then it's going to take an unbelievable amount of energy to pull the child away from the parent. Al pitam b'das, the child would leave. Right? If there was an abusive boss at work, and I can get another job easily, so I just say, look, you're just a creep. I'm quitting. I'm going to get another job. It's not difficult to do. Okay. That's very difficult to do for a parent and a child. Right? Why? Well, because there's a level beyond tam v'das. The relationship with the boss is all LP tam v'das, right? Why do I have this relationship? Well, I have to make a living, right? So I have to make a living. Say, can I make a living some other way? Well, yes. As a matter of fact, there is a job down the street with a person who I've met who happens to be a nice person, and you're a terrible, abusive person. So why in the world would I work for you? I'll work for him. I get more money by you. Why? It's not worth it. What do I care? It's not worth it. I'll work for him. Okay. That's not a particularly difficult decision, and that's all LP tam v'das. The child and the parent, it's not that at all. Unfortunately, sometimes in the negative, you see the positive of it, right? The abusive parent is very hard to pull the child away because the relationship is beyond tam v'das. So if the Nefesh Bahamis can chaperayim and connect to the Av of the Nefesh Elokis, so now the love of the Nefesh Bahamis is beyond tam v'das, it's not coming from intellect. The Ava zu hi b'derech klal, Ava Rabba, a great love, like we say in Davening, shelamayla mihagbalas kli halev, which is beyond the limitations of the vessel of the heart. That doesn't mean it won't register in my heart and resonate in my heart, but it's coming from a place beyond my heart, and so therefore my heart is going to have a hard time containing all of this love. Al Yadeshim is so therefore what? I'll become to a certain extent bottle. My focus won't be on me, it'll be on the other, the love, the beloved, and not me. Al Yadei Zem is battle Metzias the Nefesh Bahamis. So the Nefesh Bahamis becomes bottle. Because the Nefesh Bahamis got to a place beyond its own existence. Al Yadei Zeh hi nefeches l'toiv. And through this now it's been transformed into good. And that's ishafcha, that's transformation, shelamayla miskafi, which is beyond iskafi. So the Rabbi just explained the two different levels in which the Nefesh Bahamis can be affected. The Aveda from below is going to produce iskafi, even if this iskafia is truly that the Nefesh Bahamis comes to a state of love. But the love is still, and the way the Rebbe described it here, intellectual. I appreciate the fact that the Eibuchter is worthy of my love, but that hasn't penetrated into my heart yet. Therefore, there's no ishafcha, there's no transformation. The second level, and that usually comes from a light, that is the source of that is going to be a revelation from above, which can come as a result of the Aveda from below, right? Meaning, that's not what the Rebbe is talking about here, and that's not his discussion. He doesn't want to go there. But in Kuntrus Aveda, in Kuntrus Tefillah, and Bechlal, when Chassidus talks about his beinunus, so the idea of these beinunus is not to stay in the intellectual. The whole idea of his beinunus is to use the intellectual understanding to come to a point of emotional attachment, go beyond intellect. Right? At first, it resonates down into the emotion because the intellect is so absolute and clear. But not only that, ultimately it opens up the person to a super rational connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's the ultimate point of Jewish meditation, so to speak. People love those words. Oh, wow, we have meditation too? Oh, we're cool. Right? Okay. Right? So that he's beinunus. You know, if you want to translate his beinunus in a way that some kid on campus will feel good about being Jewish, so call it meditation. Oh, cool. Okay. But what does it really mean? It comes the word bina, to delve deeply into understanding. Bina is with one nun. The nut is two nuns, so to speak, a deeper level of bina. And what does that deeper level of bina allow you to do? What's it ultimately all about? To get to a point beyond intellect. Using intellect to get to a point beyond intellect. So the Rebbe describes that in Kuntrus Aveda, that through the intellectual understanding, a person comes not only to an intellectual understanding of Elokus, but to an experience of Elokus, which transcends intellect. Oh, okay. That's the ultimate purpose of these Beinanus. That's when a person can really daven. Okay, so the first level, the Rabbi said, that's intellect and that's iskafia. Subduing the intellect of the Nefesh Ba'amis so that it's masking to the love of the Nefesh Elokis. The second level is the revelation of a light from above, which brings about a bittul of the Nefesh Ba'amis, and that's isafcha. Now the lave is completely and totally buttled to the Eibishter. What does the lave love? The Eibishter, not itself. Doesn't mean it doesn't take care of itself, right? But its focus is on self. Naturally, of course, the focus in Nefesh Ba'amis is on self. Right? Children, we all start off there. Most people start off as children. And we're going to see footnote 29 in a second. But children start off in a point where the first 5 or 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever it is, depends on the kid. But and don't worry if your kid is 4 days late. Nothing's going to happen. They start off with absolutely no awareness of anybody outside of themselves. Therefore, there's no such thing as social interaction with a newborn. They don't smile socially because they saw you and are happy to see you, because they don't see you as anything outside of themselves. They are completely and totally self-absorbed. Now, we don't call them selfish because they're 3 weeks old. If someone is that way at 20, we call them selfish. They're that way at 3 weeks, we call that natural. That's just the way they are. Oh, so then slowly but surely, at about 5 or 6 weeks, it's actually, the first smile is always a major event in the house, is they actually look at you. And you can see that they're like all of a sudden coming to the realization that there's a you there. And usually the smile starts with half of their lip, one half of their mouth starts there. And then, right away or within a week or two, they will smile. They'll have a big smile when they see you. They'll break into a smile. Why? Because they're incomplete at this point. Right? And it stays pretty incomplete for quite a while. Perfectly reasonable for a 2-year-old to walk into their parents' room, wake up their mother and say at 3 a.m. and say, I'm thirsty. Perfectly reasonable for a 2-year-old to do that. That's not called selfish. That's called being 2. And the mother gets up and gets the kid a drink and puts him back in his bed and goes back to sleep. A 15-year-old does that. He's a very, very unwell 15-year-old. Because that 15-year-old is not able to appreciate the fact that his mother is not an extension of him, and his mother works hard and is tired, and he should probably let her sleep and deal with this himself and not bother her. Now, there are 15-year-olds who will go wake up their parents, right? It's really, but it's sick. That's really, and I mean sick, like unhealthy, like that's unhealthy. Okay. So now that obviously is a rather extreme example of it, but I can be that way, right? I can be a person who has a hard time experiencing things outside of myself, okay? That's generally a function of maturity. So also the maturity of the Nefesh Ba'amis is what? Is the Nefesh Ba'amis becoming more and more aware of the other being the Eibishter. That also includes other people, obviously, but it in the deepest level includes the Eibishter. Let's go further. It's another aspect of Shalom. So here was a Shalom where through the bittul of the Messias of the Nefesh Ba'amis, so now there's Shalom. There's no enemy. Right? Sorry. Wait, I'm sorry, footnote 29. We said we're going to learn footnote 29. Also from Ayin base. And we talked about this outside, so it's nice to see it inside. Hemshech Ayin Reish base, that's it's usually written. We just say Ayin base, which is the most famous Hemshech in Chassidus. Hemshech means a series of Maimarim that build one upon the other. There's 144 Maimarim over a 5-year period, 6-year period. Taf Reish Ayin base. So that's 1912 to Taf Reish Ayin Zayin Ayin Vav. That's 1916. So the Rebbe Shab said Maimarim, and they built one upon the other. It's interesting, the Rebbe Shab, the Maimarim, as they're printed, it's actually, the whole thing is very interesting, that there's a sefer, a 3-volume sefer. The third volume were written, not said. The first 2 volumes, this is much. When they wrote down the Maimer, would then add a beginning and an end to the Maimer that was shaykh to the Parsha. He'd ask some questions about the Parsha, and then he'd answer them at the end based on what was in the middle. But the Maimer that the Rabbi actually said had nothing to do for in Chassidus. It have to be finished first. And but it's quote, as a matter of fact, it wasn't even printed. It was very hard to get until Tafshin Lamed Ches, and they asked the Rebbe to print it, and the Rebbe said, you can print it in accordance with the instruction of the Rebbe. We're printing this book, because it wasn't with the instruction of the Rebbe. Right? Rav Yol points out that they printed it in Tafshin Lamed Ches, and the Rebbe got sick. The next time they printed it was Tafshin Lamed Beis, and the Rebbe got sick, so to speak. Hemshech Tafresh Ayin Beis. V'ra'ei Sham. Go look there on page 1321. Dugma lezeh. An example of this. And this is just what we saw, so I want you to see it here. Talked about it. The Kisha Kategar, when the prosecuting attorney, Roya, Haras Pnei HaMelech, the illumination of the face of the king, B'rav Tov V'Chesed, and the great Chesed of the king. So it's not that he's having a discussion with the Sanegar, with the defending attorney, and he might agree with the, like we talked about in the Mashal, he might have agree with the Sanegar and come to a conclusion that the Sanegar is right and therefore this person's innocent. That's his lavshus. That's the first level. That's still his kafia. What if the king shows up and the king is Molei Chesed? So then the category is always Metzias. There's no category anymore. When are you going to prosecute? The king just came and is expressing his chesed. Right? So that's what the Rabbi says here. B'rav tev chesed hu nefach l'sanegar. He's transformed into a sanegar. Urei baruch, and the Rabbi quotes the Maimer that we mentioned earlier. Urei baruch, you see this at great length. Dibur maschil machar chodesh. Our Rebbe's Maimer, Machar Chodesh, Tafshin Yud Aleph. The Rebbe's first year being a Rebbe officially. Okay. Let's go a little further. Besholom. Shenasa Yidei Abira. There's another guy, Betchila Menagid. First he was in opposition. Nasa Oyev. Now he becomes one who was first Menagid is now an Oyev, right? He was in opposition, and now he's one who loves. Ubeloshen Akosev, like it says in the pasuk, Gam Oyevav Yashli Mitoy. Even his enemies will make peace with him. Will be whole with him, literally, right? Okay. Okay, look at footnote 30. Mishlei, it's pasuk in Mishlei. There's Zayin, Bezoyer. What does the Zoyer say? Bahahu Yetzirah, who is the enemy? The Yetzirah is Kafya Kamei, the Yetzirah. It's subdued in front of the Yetzirah. So now it's interesting. Ba'al-pi mashakasu bifnim, and based on what we've been saying inside this Maimer, she'inyan oyev yashli midai, that his enemies make peace with him, but this peace, it's not that the enemy is no longer an enemy, still an enemy. This is the level below, right? This is the iskafia of it all. He's still an enemy, still being referred to as an enemy. He's just not expressing it. This is what we've been saying in the Maimer. This is essentially in the level of Hislavshus, right? The avoda of the Nefesh Abahamis encountering the Nefesh Alkis. He's been in this, that the Seichel of the Nefesh Abahamis comes to a realization that the Eibishter is good, but it's all Seichel. Yum tak lashon hazar, therefore it's sweetened, the language of the Zar. In other words, the language of the Zar is in line with what we're teaching. In this Maimer, this footnote is saying, iskafia kamedi Yitzhar. It's subdued in front of the Yitzhar. It's not ishafcha, it's not transformed in front of the Yitzhar. It's simply subdued. Right? Like the Kategar, when the Senegar convinces him that his argument is right, and therefore this guy's innocent. Okay, but he's still a Kategar. He's going to come back. He's going to have his day. And were they to find new evidence, he'd open up the case again, right? He'd go to the courts and say, "I have new evidence to show that this guy's guilty." Usually, it's the other way around. Right? In Jewish courts, it's only the other way around. When someone leaves a Jewish court innocent, that's it. If he leaves guilty, you can always come back and try to find him innocent. But if he leaves innocent, that's the end. Okay? Usually, in Jewish courts, I don't think that's the law, but that's usually how it happens, right? They'll find him guilty, and then later on, they'll find new evidence and find him innocent. Usually. Not always, though. Once you hear about these people who were on death row for 25 years, and then all of a sudden they found out that the guy didn't do it, right? They usually give them a few in some place in, who knows where, Nebraska. So they ended up making a good living in jail, though I don't think anybody would really want to do that, right? But you do hear about that. They're actually right now in that whole, what off. The cops